Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries Today. In just a moment, we'll be sharing with you the latest in what's going on in the world of Christian ministry and outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's edition of Raceway Ministries Today. Raceway Ministries Today, of course, is the opportunity that we have to provide a podcast interview to share a little bit about what God has going on across the country in the way of our goal to share Jesus with race fans and other people all across the United States. And I want to thank you for listening to our podcast today. I'm Roger Marsh with the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and if you'd like to know more about what we do in Raceway Ministries work, you can certainly go to our website, racewayministries.org, or you can pick up some information on our Facebook page, which is National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Then we also have another Facebook page entitled Raceway Ministries at the Short Tracks, which features a lot of chaplains and work that goes on at the short tracks all across the country. And then, of course, we have other podcast interviews that are on our National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries YouTube channel, and you can go back and pick up some of those. But thanks for joining us today. It's a delight to be able to visit today with Mark Penticuff. We have interviewed Mark before. You can probably go back into our catalog of Raceway Ministry Today podcast interviews and pick up a previous interview that we did with Mark as he tells about Crossroads Racing Ministries, which is the organization that he has put together, and you can find out other things about his personal life. But Mark resides in Springfield, Missouri, and still has Crossroads Racing Ministry. He's raced cars before. He served as a chaplain at raceways. He and his wife Jill currently have an outreach ministry in Springfield that they've put together and do a lot of outreach to people in their neighborhood where they moved. And Mark has turned into quite the mechanic, working on people's cars. People who are in need, can't afford repair, they come to Mark and he fixes their cars, and as he shared with me just a few minutes ago, even helps them relocate and move across town. So Mark's a busy guy, but he also heads up Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries, which provides ministry and outreach to the NASCAR fans at Kansas Speedway. So Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on the phone. How in the world are you doing in Springfield today?
Doing well. We had a bout of rain yesterday, so it took the temperature down a few notches.
Oh,
which
good.
Always is wonderful. So
yeah.
You never know when that'll happen. It's sometimes quite unexpected, and that was what yesterday was. So it was a nice, refreshing day. So doing well.
Well, I'm sure things are hot and humid up in Springfield these days, so a little refreshing rainstorm to cool things off, that helps a lot, especially when you work outside doing some of the things that you do out there in the garage. I kind of gave a description a few minutes ago of what you do there in Springfield. Anything that you want to add to that? It sounds like you have had a busy summer already helping folks out, probably still conducting Bible studies and things there in your house. Anything else going on?
The only other big local thing coming up is here in a few weeks, in the beginning of August, there's a big Route 66 car show. And so it's a huge deal. We have almost 800 cars, and it takes over a lot of downtown. And I've gone to that for many years since stopping racing and getting a muscle car, show car to go to car shows. So that'll be one of the big car show events of the summer. It kind of depends on our schedule, how many car shows I get to go to and hand out some of the pit stop and mechanics Bibles that are available, through National Fellowship. And so it's just one of those opportunities to meet local people for the most part, and have another way to connect with people in town besides racing. But it is tied to cars, of course. So always a lot of fun.
Well, I know you've been a car guy most of your life, and you've done a lot of stuff, particularly in Raceway Ministries work with us through the years. I want you to know I had a great time when I stopped in Springfield on my way. I can't remember where I was headed a few weeks ago, and stopped in Springfield to visit with you and have lunch. And man, I was really impressed to get on your property there, take a look at that old garage in your backyard that you've refurbished, and to listen and learn about all the mechanic work that you do back there for people. Quite an outreach ministry that you guys have going on there, and I just thank the Lord for people like you to get out there and mix and mingle with folks at car shows and Bible studies in your living room, and doing mechanic work for people there that are in need. You guys have quite an outreach going on, and I want you to know I pray for you often and just thank the Lord for what you do there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. The main topic today is going to be to talk a little bit about Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries, and just to kind of summarize what we're going to talk about today, Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries has a rich history. I can remember when the ministry began. I think it was back in 2001 or so. I was doing ministry at Texas Motor Speedway, and Mark Joseph and I think Cole Cochran and maybe a couple other guys came down here to Texas and hung out with us through a NASCAR weekend, and then went back to Kansas City and built some relationships with the staff there at the Speedway, and were able to get some outreach ministry going. And before the casino was built out there where the campground used to be, had a huge presence out there and had quite the ministry going on. A lot of people, a lot of volunteers, a lot of churches were involved through the Kansas City Kansas Baptist Association, and very, very strong ministry. And I remember going up there a few times and being a part of their ministry weekends, and very impressed with what they did. And of course, you know, with anything, time goes on, things change. And so as time has gone on with Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries, they've had to relocate because they built the casino where their spot used to be out in the campground. And now, Mark, you can correct me, but I think the ministry is still located in a parking lot that is kind of shared by a local soccer stadium, I believe, and then the Speedway. They share the parking lot, and the ministry is set up out there in that parking lot. Is it still out there in that area?
For a few years we had two spots, and that was one of them.
Okay.
And so that spot we're not using right now. It is simply because of, you know, the number of people and how many people we have coming out now, because we're smaller.
Right.
But that opportunity to go over to that campground is still there. So we're still at the Richmond campground close to the casino, in their like entry area that is a paved area where the tram is, and the showers, and the check-in station and all that. So we're there at the very beginning, and that's also where they have some handicap campsites that are paved rather than in the field out there. So that's been our main location since, I would say, 7 or 8 years, since we've kind of contracted a little bit in our numbers. So.
Well, you know, I've observed this through the years with Raceway Ministries teams. You know, they come and they go. Some years they're strong. Sometimes they go for 5 to 7 years with a real strong effort out there at the Speedway. And then life changes for a lot of the people. Sometimes the leadership changes. Sometimes the people, the families that are in Raceway Ministry work, move on to other opportunities to do missions work, or in some cases they just simply become too old to get out there and do all the things they used to do. And as they enter into their senior years, they just can't do it anymore. And for a wide variety of reasons, our Raceway Ministry teams come and go in terms of strength. And I know that that's happened there at Kansas Speedway. I can remember a few years ago talking with some of the leadership there and talking with some of the people involved in the Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministry group. You know, people moved on. People went to other things. They got involved in other types of church work. Some moved to other states to be involved in missions work in a different way. And then, of course, there was somewhat of a decline in NASCAR over the years in terms of its popularity, its attendance. Some of the corporate structure began to change. COVID came along, all kinds of things that have caused some challenges for Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries. So what I want to talk about is, leading up to your most recent race weekend back in May, there were some challenges that had to be overcome. And so I want us to investigate that a little bit, and I want to kind of tap into your brain and see what you know about how those things developed and how you overcame some of those things. But before that, give me a brief description of what you guys actually did back in May with the NASCAR weekend there at Kansas Speedway.
Well, as you know, Linda Kinder and I are the two mainstays, so to speak, when it comes to the history of KCARM at the Speedway. And she has always been on the guest services coordination side, working hand in hand with the leadership of the track to help coordinate not just Raceway Ministries doing guest services, but other groups like the Knights of Columbus or college baseball teams, or whoever wants to come in and volunteer time for the Speedway, and then the Speedway will give to their nonprofit or their organization based on the hours they serve. And so she's been coordinating that for quite some time, and through that has maintained a strong connection with the track, along with Cole Cochran, who has also still been serving all these years as well. with Linda, and again, mainly with either guest services or some sort of a part which I would consider to be more on the track relationship side.
Sure.
Whereas I've been focused on the campground and the ministry that's going on with the fans in the campgrounds.
Sure.
And so I think that's been a huge benefit, that it's not one person having to do all of those things.
Right.
Between the three of us over the years, there's always been a connection with somebody in leadership to help keep that communication with the track, but also have that time to focus on what are we going to do in ministry here, and how are we going to maintain that positive relationship so we can still have ministry in the campground as well. And so I think the big factor is that it's not been a complete transition where we've lost everyone throughout this time. With Cole and Linda and I think we've all been there some part of every single weekend involved, since the inception of racing at Kansas. So I think that's the big thing.
Well, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I would guess, as we kind of review the factors that help keep a ministry alive at a speedway, we can't underscore enough the importance of having someone consistently in contact with the raceway to keep things going. I know of one case in particular, and I won't mention the location, but I know of one NASCAR venue in particular where I made a phone call one day to the offices to just check and see how the Raceway Ministry team was functioning. And the girl that answered the phone there in the office said, I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. We haven't heard from the Raceway Ministries team here in a couple of years, and we didn't even have any idea that they were still up and going and available to us. And it just really gave me a sense of awareness that we have to take the initiative and make sure that we stay in touch with the Speedway staff. In many cases, it's because it's a little bit of a revolving door, and if we lose touch with the office itself, we lose touch with everybody, and we just lose our opportunities. So it's very important to stay in touch. And I can't help but saying I admire you and Linda and Cole Cochran, just the three of you hanging in there and making sure that there's a foot in the door at every single event. I would have to imagine that has been one of the major factors in keeping the thing alive.
Yeah, and being in Springfield, I'm a good 3 hours away from the track, whereas Linda is 30 minutes or less from the track. Yeah. And so her being also up in Kansas City has been vital as well, and Cole being up there as well.
Sure.
Whereas for me, to be that far away would be difficult to have that same relationship with the track where you can talk to them personally and come in for a meeting personally much more easily than I ever could, especially when I was working. So that's been a big thing. And then we're able to support each other because it's not one person that's having to do everything. So it's easier to support each other because you have more of a margin just in your energy and your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Well, now thinking about over the years, I already alluded to the fact that at one time, Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries was very strong. In fact, I would have put the group up at the top of some of our most effective raceway ministry teams across the country. You had several churches involved. You had the backing of the Kansas Baptist Association. You had the support of several different local churches. And I can recall times that I went up there to help you guys out when there would be 20 or so volunteers around and fans coming around and activities going on for 4 or 5 days in a row. At some point along the way, there was a transition to somewhat of a diminished opportunity and a decline in participation. And I'm not trying to point a finger of blame at anybody, but I just wondered if you can identify what were some of the factors that contributed to that decline and to some of the minimized opportunities there. Are there any things that you can specifically identify that led to the challenge of keeping it alive?
I think and this is something that, just recently is kind of the light bulb kind of came on in connecting some things locally and what goes on in Kansas. And that is that who you have serve with you and your connection with them personally really makes a big difference in their longevity and their service. And when an individual that comes in and works and they're tied to an individual more than they are maybe to the call to reach people, there becomes sometimes that individual, once a person is not there with them, or a church or something, that drive to reach people was not independent of that person. I don't know if I'm saying that very clearly, but oftentimes volunteers are volunteering because of an individual or because of a church. And when that church or individual transitions out, anyone that was going because of that reason and not because they had that inner call or drive for this ministry, they're going to be the first ones to go and not return. And I think that was the bulk of what happened. Is there were a lot of churches that we had individuals that were tied to that kind of a mindset, I guess. Right or wrong or whatever, that's not what I think. That's just the way that kind of went. And even piggybacking on that, I think that's also the most effective way that I have ever had involvement in ministry, as far as recruiting individuals or having individuals come out and do this, has always been because I have had a relationship with that person, either mentoring or we've served together in some way, and then we reconnected and they happen to be close to this speedway or had this this time off or whatever, and they're like, yeah, I've served with you before, I want to come out and do this. But if they don't have that desire, then after that initial service in Raceway Ministries, they don't have that desire that I want to do this. Not because you're here, but I want to do this. That's going to be the difference in whether they are going to be in it for the long haul.
Well, I think you're onto something there, because I don't think anybody would argue against the fact that people develop loyalties and they have a sense of allegiance and a connection to a person, and I don't think there's anything wrong with those personal connections or those commitments to a specific church or a specific personality. But I think to dig a little bit deeper, what we have to do is make sure that we ourselves and the volunteers that work with us are devoted to the cause and to Christ himself instead of just to a person. One of the things that I've noticed through the years is if we don't have a diversity of representation for several different churches involved in a Raceway ministry team, for example, especially at the leadership level, then if there's only one church that's sponsoring the whole thing or conducting the whole thing, if something happens and they shift their energy to something else, then all of a sudden we're left in the lurch and we don't have anybody. So there needs to be some diversity and multiplicity in terms of churches and groups of people that are involved. At the same time, the commitment needs to be a little bit higher than that. It needs to be to the cause, and it needs to be to Christ, and it needs to be a devotion to the calling that God has extended to us to be involved in ministry and outreach to people. I think that's what I hear you saying, and I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head there with a lot of the decline that takes place in some of our Raceway ministry teams. Any other factors that come to mind?
I think we mentioned some of them already, and I think the decline in the changes in NASCAR over the last 10 years, and whether it's the corporate structure, the fan base, just the drivers that have retired and the fans that were associated with those drivers, the economy, all of these things have been huge factors. And even like for Kansas, it's, what date are they going to choose? The changing of date weekends, it's been crazy because I don't know if other tracks have experienced the same amount of date adjustment. I know there are some that have more than others. It's just so inconsistent that it's hard for a family to say, yeah, I can go. Oh, wait, now it's on a different weekend. Oh, now it's later in the year, it's earlier in the year. Whether school's out or not determines how many kids can come. And we haven't had a race where school's been out in so many years. It's hard to predict whether families are going to take their kids out of school to come to this, or if it's going to be, just the parents' weekend on their own. And so those are all factors. The tightening of the weekend to making it shorter, I think is a factor as well. There are more people that are coming for the day and not camping. So there's less camping at some sites than others. So all of the above go into this. And then so if you're a someone who's been volunteering for this, and your ministry opportunity gets contracted so much, even though you're committed to the cause, like you say, for the cause of Christ, it does feel a little bit more constricted, a little bit more urgent when you're there. What are we going to do? Because we only have this much time now. We had more time. Now we have less time.
Yeah.
And because when you have only 2 days of on-track activities, they fill up every moment of that day with an on-track activity. So when are we going to be able to minister? Because there used to be a lot more downtime on the weekend.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I hear you saying is there are a number of factors that have affected fan attendance and fan involvement, like change of schedules and the condensing of the weekend schedule and the moving of the dates all over the place. I think I hear you saying that has the same effect on being able to get volunteers committed.
Yes.
Because of all the changes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine that. And as far as what I've been able to tell from looking at some of the projections for the future of NASCAR scheduling, that's not going to change. A lot of different things, big changes going on with new tracks coming on the schedule and dates shuffling around. That is going to impact our ability to get volunteers at the Speedway. I have no doubt about that. So, in light of that, what are some of the things, strategies, steps that you have taken to keep things moving along? And what are some of the strategies that maybe the Lord has put on your heart to keep things alive in the days ahead? Have you hit on anything that you're going to try, or have you come across anything that you feel like has worked and is going to continue to work to keep the ministry growing instead of declining?
I think it's something that can be both a hindrance, but also when you're trying to keep something going when it's small, is a help. And that is looking to those that you have served with that maybe you haven't contacted in a while because your life tracks have changed.
Right.
But getting a hold of Dave McLaughlin, who I literally had as a student in class when I was a teacher at Glendale. And then he was in a college ministry at a church where we served.
Okay.
And then lost touch, but served with him, was able to help mentor him to a certain extent. Just being around each other in ministry, and his brother, probably knew his brother better, and he came up and served at Kansas Speedway. His brother did numerous times.
Okay, all right.
And so now reconnecting with Dave because he's at Lenexa, Kansas, at a church there. Did not know that until I happened to see, because I was following him on Facebook, I happened to see that and it just clicked that he is in Kansas. He is right there.
Yeah.
And he's doing local missions ministries at his church. And I'm like, this is what I need to keep my eyes out for, is I already know people.
Yeah.
And maybe I haven't made contact with them in years because our lives have separated, and we haven't had that contact. But to look for that. And so he's come on board and excited about the opportunity for bringing people into the ministry so they can get their feet wet, so to speak, with outreach and evangelism through Kansas Speedway, through the ministry we're doing there.
Good.
And so that partnership, it's personal. But the one thing we've talked about is that, it's not about whether I'm here or not. It's whether there are people at Kansas Speedway that you want to reach with the love of Christ.
Yeah.
And that needs to be, like you said, the thing that you are here for. And you're not here because I asked you to be here or I need help. You're here because this is something that you believe is going to be God honoring, and you've got this field of individuals to reach, that's out there. So, rather than trying to cold call, so to speak, a church and say, hey, are you interested in serving at Kansas Speedway? You're 20 minutes from the track. I'm seeing more and more, looking back, that the best partners in ministry are those that have known me personally, but have also not been there because just I'm there, but they had that heart for it. And I think that's also a way that we can then expand our network nationwide through Raceway Ministries, is who are people that that are close to a track that needs help. Yeah. That that are serving, that have had the same heart, but maybe you haven't talked to in years just because that's the way life goes.
Sure.
And that there could be an opportunity that they know someone or they know a person that would be the perfect fit to help work with that, not because of the person, but because of the person of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I think that is something that can be used on a national level that I think would be more effective in the long run than maybe just I'm going to present at 6 churches over this summer and see if there's anyone there that's interested. I'm realizing I have more connections than I realized in my life experience, and I need to keep my eyes open to that.
I'm so excited about what you're describing, Mark, because I see 2 things that you're describing there that need to be at the top top of the list of how we strategize to keep Raceway Ministry strong. The first thing is keep the calling at the top. I mean, the calling that Jesus extends to us to be involved in sharing His grace, His mercy, and His love with people who need Him, that's what we are called to do. We're called to fulfill that calling in response to Him and not in response to anything else. So if we keep the calling at the top, and if we maintain the connections that we already have and just keep connecting and connecting and connecting with people, then if we have the calling at the top of the list as the main priority, then we're going to make sure that the connections that we make are tied directly into that same approach, and then the ones that become involved are also going to be committed to the calling. So I see calling and connections as two top things there. And I think you hit on something that's really strong. If we'll just maintain strong connections, we're going to discover that God has put people in the right places at the right time to accomplish what He wants to accomplish. I've been amazed at when we have tried to restart some of the ministry teams that have fallen to the wayside over the years. I'm amazed at the connections that are made. We recently were trying to make connections with people in the Darlington, Florence area in South Carolina to restart the Darlington Raceway Ministries team. So I contacted Connie Yancey in Atlanta because I knew she had a really effective ministry going on there, and I wanted to find out what she was doing to find volunteers. And all of a sudden she shared with me that she had met her husband Tim in South Carolina, and they'd gotten married at a church in Florence. And so all of a sudden she connected me with some people in the Florence, South Carolina area that would probably be very interested in being a part of restarting that ministry there. And that just came out of the blue, but it came because of connections. And I think that ties directly into what you're describing there. These connections that we maintain, they come alive at the right time. I mean, if I understood you correctly, this was a student of yours in high school?
Yeah. Wow. They were twin brothers. Man. And they were involved in the FCA and strong believers all through high school, and they attended the church that we were going to, and
Wow.
We were involved in the college ministry when they were in college, and just kind of kept in touch over time. A strong Christian family, both doing, ministry work. One of them was involved in FCA extensively for a long period of time, was like the state director for Missouri for FCA.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave, who's up in Lenexa, was in a Christian band for a long time, and then got involved in church ministry with local missions and things like that more recently. So
yeah,
it's one of the things we've been in touch with that family for years. When we moved into this house that you visited in Springfield just a few weeks ago, their father was a contractor in town. We wanted to use him to be the contractor on our house. He had just retired from that and became a home inspector. So we used him to inspect every house that we looked at in our new neighborhood we were looking to move into. And so we've kept in touch with him as well. So it's been this neat thing, because I was involved with FCA as a teacher. So I kept in touch with Dan, Dave's brother, for years and years through FCA. When I was teaching, and then once I retired, it's like now I'm in touch with Dave. So It's a cool thing. So
yeah, well, just keeping the connections alive, man, seems to make all the difference in the world. What a great point, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, what can we learn, and what can Raceway Ministries teams do to stay strong and avoid maybe some of the challenges that KCARM has gone through? I know we've already kind of talked about some things, but anything else that Raceway Ministry teams can do to remain strong and weather the storms and the challenges that come?
I think I know, dealing with Kansas Speedway, I know that Linda and Cole have always tried to have the mindset, just like in Philippians, of humility, where you're considering others more important than yourselves. And our ministry cannot be more important than the track itself.
Yeah.
The existence of Raceway Ministries. And so we need to continue to have that humility toward the track, toward the people we're dealing with, so they see that we are not using them so that we can have a presence, that we are serving them, and we are honored if they would allow us to have a service and allow us to be able to minister as well. But you're more important than we are. And I think besides the daily stuff and how that should drive your life, that application is important, just so you can have that strong relationship with your track. Because if they see us acting in humility consistently, it's going to be hard for them not to want us around, because we'll be their best workers. We'll be the best people they can have for them at their track, because we're looking to their interests first.
Well, I look back over the years and some of the Raceway Ministry teams that we've had that were asked to not come back to the Speedway property and lost their opportunity there. They lost it primarily because they had lost that sense of servanthood. And what they did was they were kind of strutting around with their shoulders back trying to tell the Speedway how to run their business. And the Speedway didn't like that, of course. But on the other side of the coin, whenever a servant attitude is demonstrated, the Speedways respond very positively to that. And I think you're exactly right. We become their best workers when we serve and recognize that we're guests on their property. And when we lose that sense of humility, we're going to probably lose our opportunity like you described. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
I think that, and then just keeping your eyes open. I think that was the one thing that I realized is, and that's part of looking to the interests of others, but keeping your eyes open. Obviously, God is going to bring people together, but some of that is our being obedient to the Word and looking to the needs of others, but also looking for those to join with you in ministry.
Yeah.
And keeping those eyes open. I think sometimes we get so focused on what we are doing and planning for in the ministry, we don't keep our eyes out in front of us sometimes.
Yeah, good point. It's been 23, 22 years, I think, since Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries was established, and I think 2001 is the same year that Kansas Speedway opened, if I'm not mistaken. And it's been quite a journey and quite a history of sharing Jesus there, a lot of good times, a lot of great times, great experiences of ministry there, and then, of course, moving through the challenging times like we've already described. That's part of it, but you have been a big factor in helping keep things going. What led you individually and personally to kind of keep things moving along there at Speedway? I know Cole and Linda have been a big part of that, but the three of you have done a great job of keeping the torch burning, so to speak. Linda and Cole live there in the Kansas City area. You live over in Springfield. Describe to me what compelled you to keep being a part of it.
I think it's the same thing that, when I met Frank Stark at church, we went to the same church, and that's how I got started. And
Yep.
And part of what has always stuck with me and the things where there are all these people here and there's no one ministering to them. There's no one sharing the gospel with them.
Yes.
And I think that's stuck in my head that, that's a unique opportunity, and I don't want to stop that opportunity, because yes, you help people personally in your neighborhood. You do these things that are close and local, but the sheer number of people and the lostness that you see is a different type of thing, and I don't want to lose that burden. And it's been a burden in addition to the local things, but that burden for the number of people that are trying to find their joy in something besides Jesus, and it's that NASCAR weekend. And to be there for that and to try to bring Christ into that and bring the gospel into that has really been something that's a little different than the local, and I feel like that needs to be a part of my life.
Yeah.
And this to me has been the most effective and what fits really my personality and my life experience better than any other that I've come across. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I tell you, I got to hand it to you guys there in Missouri. Frank Stark, he was from Stratford, pastored outside of Springfield there, and was one of the guys that founded and launched Raceway Ministry, back in the 70s and 80s. As a NASCAR fan and a preacher, I remember the story that he told about being at Daytona, and with his wife Betty, looked out across the campground and made that famous declaration, somebody ought to be doing something.
Yep.
And so with that same calling and that same sense of passion for sharing Jesus with people and seeing the opportunity, he and Betty conducted a church service there in the campground at Daytona, and the rest is history, so to speak. But I want to say thank you to Mark Penticuff. Thank you for standing on Frank's shoulders and keeping the dream and the vision and the calling alive there at Kansas Speedway. That's the kind of passion, that's the kind of sense of calling that every one of us need to be able to not only do the ministry, but to withstand the storms and the challenges that come. So, man, thank you for keeping that calling at the top of your priority list in your life. That's absolutely awesome. Now, you have a race weekend coming up in September. NASCAR will be back there. I guess that'll be in the midst of the playoffs.
Yep.
So what's the prospects for things there at Kansas Speedway this fall? How are things looking for the race weekend from the Speedway's perspective? And then what about you guys in terms of ministry? What are you guys going to be doing there?
As far as the weekend, it'll be pretty busy because you've got trucks, Xfinity, ARCA, you got everybody there. So it should be it'll be the big weekend of the two. The spring was just trucks and Cup with an ARCA race thrown in there. So whenever you have everybody there, it's always a bigger crowd. So it'll be the bigger of our two, although the time is the same. So it'll be busy on track activities. So
sure will.
We're looking to kind of like on those days where you're not sure how many people are going to be on track or not, we're going to be doing things in the tent, some craft things with frisbees and water bottles and all sorts of stuff like that, and handing out cold water and snacks and just hanging out with fans and families and playing games, maybe flying some kites if the weather is cooperative without the rain like we had in the spring. So
right.
And then we'll have our big Hot Wheels Derby.
Oh, good.
Which has become kind of the thing that everybody looks forward to, and that's been our big family ministry event. In the evening after the Xfinity race, we'll do that.
Good.
And we'll have our Sunday service and ADA golf cart stuff that we do within the campground as well, which is always a good way to get to know people, and pray for them and those kind of things. So that's kind of what we've got going on. Like I said, this is the bigger of the two, so we're looking forward to it. We've got a bunch of people coming out from Lenexa Baptist, from Dave's church, that are going to be coming out. Some people that are repeat ones now, since they've come out for a couple years, that really enjoyed the Hot Wheels races. So we have a bunch of people that are just specifically, I want to come back for that. Awesome. I want to serve there. So we've got some people that are really excited about that kind of thing. And he's got people coming over for the service to do the music. And they even have some interns that are wanting to learn how to preach and do things like that are going to come out and do some preaching for us.
Awesome.
So that partnership is looking good, and we're looking to grow with some other churches that they have partnered with in the past as well, to try to expand, like you said, the diversity of churches involved. So.
Well, wow. Sounds like you got a busy weekend coming up, and it sounds like you have a lot of good things planned to create opportunities to share God's grace and mercy in Christ with the NASCAR fans. So we'll be praying for you and all the people that are being involved, and obviously if there's anything we can do to be of any help, be sure and let us know. But Mark, I just want to say thank you, not only for your time today to get on the phone and talk with us and share with us what's on your heart about Raceway Ministries and some of the important priorities that we need to keep in mind if we want to keep these things moving along, keep them strong. Thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for responding to God's calling on your life to do everything you can to share the gospel with people. And thank you for your leadership there, along with Linda Kinder and Cole Cochran at Kansas City Alliance Raceway Ministries. You guys are just fantastic, and we appreciate you a lot. Any final thoughts or things that you would like to share with our listeners today?
If you're wondering what it's about and you're close to one of those tracks, get a hold of Roger, find out who's there, and get involved. Answer that call. If that nudge has been on your heart from the Lord, maybe this is an opportunity for you.
You bet. So. Yeah. Well, good deal. Thank you, Mark. Good stuff, man. Appreciate visiting with you today, and we'll be praying for you and the group as you get ready for ministry in September up there at Kansas Speedway, okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, this is Roger Marsh with Raceway Ministries today, and as we have already indicated, if you'd like to find out more about Raceway Ministries, or maybe get involved like Mark has described at a raceway that's near you, jump on our website at racewayministries.org, or you can get on our Facebook page and contact us through Facebook Messenger. You can give me a call. 940-367-4940 is my phone number. I'd love to hear from you if you want to get involved at Kansas Speedway or somewhere else, or you can get in touch directly with Mark. Mark, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to jump on the wagon there at Kansas Speedway?
You can give me a call or a text at 417-827-5953. I'm often knee-deep or hands-deep in a car. So texting is usually the best way to get a hold of me, because it's hard to grab a phone when you're in the middle of stuff like that. So,
no kidding. All right, well, good stuff. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it so much. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Raceway Ministries today. We pray that God will bless you in a big way as you move along on the road course of life. And if you haven't already trusted Jesus to be your Lord and Savior, please do that today. Thank you so much, and until next time, we'll talk to you soon. We hope you'll tune in next time as we continue to explore Christian ministry and outreach in motorsports through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. If you'd like to learn more about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, visit our website at racewayministries.org. Follow us on Facebook under the name National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Check out our podcast and videos found on our National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries YouTube channel. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us for this presentation of Raceway Ministries Today.